Today we'll be discussing a movie titled The Banker. The movie is about two black men who thrive to be successful in real estate investment in white countries, but they did this without putting out their identity. So watch out and see how the government would respond when they got to know that these black men are the true owners of the properties. The movie begins with a man known as Bernard who was thinking and gloomily staring at the window in Washington, D.C. in 1965. Bernard went to a hearing. The government issued a hearing and this black man has some charges against him. Back in 1939 at Willis, Texas, when Bernard was a young boy, he polished shoes for the white men and listened to their conversation about how they run their businesses. At times, he would hide at the back of their office and take note of important information discussed. All of this he gathered, but was caught by a man one day, and then he ran away. At night, his father collected his jotter and went through his jottings. He saw that his son is a genius and told him that he was born of the wrong color because the white men won't allow him to achieve his dream. But Bernard was optimistic. He said maybe not in Texas, maybe in other countries, he would have a chance of achieving his dream. In 1954, Bernard was now a full-grown man, so he took his family to settle in Los Angeles and they went to Eunice's uncle's house. While having supper, the man asked Bernard that he would like to do, and he replied that he would work as a real estate investor. And the man laughed at him, feeling he was unserious and can't achieve such big dreams. The next day, Bernard drove his cousin to a place where he got to meet Matt. He then went in search of buildings, trying to kick off his real estate business and as well looking for a home for his family. When he found a house he liked, he brought his wife Eunice to check out the building. When she discovers that the house was at a high rate, she took him to a friend of hers, a black who's a real estate investor, and his name is Joe. Joe welcomed them warmly, but Bernard thought he was a playboy and then left the building angrily, saying that he would never have business with such a man, and he went to meet the owner of the building, Mr. Barker, and tried negotiating with the man, but his efforts was in vain as Mr. Barker didn't yield to his idea. While still trying to get a loan, he tried meeting Mr. Reed, but his efforts were futile again, making him dejected. At night, while looking sad, he received a call from Barker that he would rent out the building to him, making Bernard very happy. Later on, Bernard began renovating the house, but when a tenant who is a white woman noticed him in the house, she queried his actions, and seeing that Bernard had finally moved into the house, she left the house angrily the next morning, not wanting to rent a house with black neighbors. But this didn't stop Bernard, as he successfully rented out the whole apartment in the building, making Barker surprised, and he praised Bernard's talent. He then offered a partnership business with Bernard. He would receive the calls while Bernard would carry out the paperwork. Day by day, their business flourished and Bernard became unsuccessful. Not all things could go well, so one day, an ugly event occurred. Barker died on his bed and never woke up from his sleep. After Barker's death, his wealth was given to his wife, who didn't want a partnership with Bernard because he's black. So she offered him a minute amount of money so he would leave the business. He had no option other than to start afresh from the beginning with the money he had earned. He then went to meet Mr. Joe back and offered a partnership business to him. He told Joe of his plan of wanting to buy the tallest commercial building downtown in Los Angeles, and Joe laughed, calling his idea a ludicrous one. But later, they agreed and became partners, then invited Matt to partner with them. Matt was to be the face of their companies, but the guy was scared. He had no idea how to run a real estate business. But Joe and Bernard helped him out. They taught him all that he needed to learn. Joe taught him how to play golf, Bernard taught him the mathematical part of being a genius in math, while Eunice helped out by teaching him the proper dining etiquette. Having practiced well, he soon became a pro. A meeting was then set for him to meet the owner of the commercial building, while Joe dressed up as a driver to see him accomplish this task. He played golf with a man showing prowess in it and set a meeting for them. The main day then came. He was nervous at first but later cooled himself, had dinner with them and discussed with them. He was able to sway the man away by showing prowess in the mathematical calculation that Bernard had sorted out and then gave him the numbers to cram. The man was wowed by his assistant, then he asked Matt how he was able to get all the calculations done offhand, but Matt acted like it was nothing and the man sold the building to him. Then the whole group celebrated their victory. They had bought the building for less than the actual rate. They moved into the building and Mr. Reed was shocked in seeing Bernard that he hadn't been given a chance to speak to him and was now one of his bosses. In 1963, Bernard drove his family to Texas, his hometown. They went to visit his father, who was proud of his son's achievement. His father then told him about how proud he was of his son who had successfully pulled through all obstacles. The next morning, Bernard went with his son, Bernard Jr., and they checked out the community. He saw a young Layden polishing shoe like he had done when he was young, then he became determined to help Negroes like him. Back in Los Angeles, he discussed with Joe that they should buy a bank in Texas and loan out money to Negroes like them, but Joe was against the idea. He felt Texas had so much racism, so it might not end up well. But after much persuasion from Bernard, he gave in, and they partnered together to expand their wealth to Texas. They successfully pulled through this, and happily, Joe congratulated Bernard for now owning a bank in his hometown. But the bank they had bought was for Florence's father, and Florence wasn't pleased seeing Matt, who was 10 years younger than him, running his father's business. He had a suspicion about Matt and kept tailing him, thereby taking pictures of him and his friend. And one day he showed up at their house, making them know that he's aware that Bernard and Joe are the real owners of the business. And they questioned him as to what he would do with his far-fetched information, but he made them know that very soon a person would be coming to check out the bank because they felt it was becoming unsafe. After all, most loans were given out to the Negroes. They thought of a way to escape the situation they were in, and Matt gave the idea that they should buy another bank. But Joe and Bernard didn't support his idea, so he threatened them that if they didn't give him full ownership of the business, he would stop working with them. Eventually, they bought the bank for him, though they didn't support his idea. Matt was adamant and went on running his business. Eunice also tried warning him, but he didn't listen. The issue began to occur. A person came from the federally insured banks to insure their papers, and this made Matt very nervous. In the end, he wasn't able to save his company because he had signaled some documents that were against the government rules for banks. While Joe and Bernard questioned him, they discovered that he had used another lawyer instead of their lawyer, and he didn't bother reading the files well and went ahead signing the document. They agreed to close down Matt's bank, but without making them aware. He used mainland bank funds to resolve his bank issues, and this was a grave mistake. When Joe and Bernard heard, they were alarmed, but it was too late. Some men came over to close down the banks, and Joe and Bernard got arrested. Bernard was angry and tried fighting them off, but his efforts were futile. Not to be arrested, Matt was then advised to lie against his friends. He was to falsely accuse them that they had manipulated him all along, and he did so. He betrayed them in court, claiming the fact that he was manipulated while Joe watched him dumbfounded and Bernard shook his head. A few days later, Joe testified in court about their doings and he voiced his opinion. He stated, "Sadly but Buddy, as a Negro, you can't get a loan, you can't own a home, you can't start a business, which means you can't build wealth. Why are the Negroes not allowed to have the American dream?" But the court tried silencing him, and after hearing, all their properties got decimated by the government and they both got imprisoned, but Matt was set free, having seen him as the victim. Later on, they both got released from prison, and Eunice was very happy seeing her husband free from prison when she saw that the men weren't sad. She became suspicious when they told her about a secret they had hidden. A night before Matt heard, a few years later, they got released from prison, and Eunice was very happy seeing her husband finally free, but she noticed that both men weren't sad at all. She became suspicious and they told her what had happened. A night before Matt hearing, he had called Bernard and made him understand the tough situation he was in. If he didn't testify against them in court, he would be sentenced to 50 years in prison. So Bernard had asked him to keep his and Joe's big buildings in the Bahamas safe. Eunice was very happy on hearing this, and they drove off to start afresh and live happily. Bernard and Howe had to start from being low, but after a while, they became very successful again. They owned 117 more buildings within a short period, and the government issued a decree that nobody was to criticize any longer based on religion and race or gender. Finally, the Negroes were able to achieve their dreams openly.